Hello, welcome to the presentation of differences between Docker and virtual machine. My name is Srini with ReleaseLogics. Okay, I'm not going to cover the basics of containers, what container is, etc. I'm sure you're already aware of that. Let's quickly go over the differences. First and foremost, as we know, each virtual machine runs its own operating system. In case of a Docker, they don't. They just use the same kernel as that of host. So that's why they're lightweight. They don't run their own operating system. And most of the virtual machines, the hypervisors are Linux based. And so you typically have a Linux based hypervisor on top of which you can either run Windows OS or Linux OS. But in case of a Docker, since it doesn't have its own operating system, it has to be same as that of host. Okay, the next one, when you start a container, you tell container to run a command. And when that command exits, the container terminates. There's no such concept in virtual machine. You just bring up virtual machine, it doesn't have to run anything, it can just sit there idle as well. Since virtual machines run their own operating system, they take few minutes to boot, whereas Docker containers, since they don't start any operating system, they just start in milliseconds. So you can start a container, terminate a container, you can write a script, and it's so fast. And Dockers are, they have an architecture such that you can track the differences uh, between two different images in Docker. Let's say you start a container with the base Ubuntu image. You add, let's say, Nginx, and then we make a fresh image out of it. And so now the new image is a layer that depends on the Ubuntu layer. So the new layer doesn't contain the entire Ubuntu operating system. Um, so it just has the Nginx. So containers are very efficient in tracking just the deltas. So you can take a lot of snapshots, and so they're very lightweight in that sense as well. Whereas virtual machines, you do take snapshots for backups, but you don't really take as many snapshots because they're not that cheap. They're not so they're a lot more heavier compared to Docker. And you cannot really run a diff between two VMs because virtual machines have everything as an operating system, and so when you do a diff, it's not really very useful. Whereas in case of a container, you can run diff between two images, and you can see exactly what are the files that are changed on that file system. So because of that concept, you can maintain images just like as if you maintain source code. So you can check in to the GitHub, and and then you can check out, and you can run the containers from that. So with that concept, Docker has what is known as a Docker Hub. In the Docker Hub, you can uh, check in images and check out images, and they also have a public repositories as well as private repositories where those images cannot be seen by the general public. And you can typically you can run maybe one or two VMs on a laptop because of the CPU and memory restrictions, whereas you can run many Docker containers in laptop. And this is a very important uh, concept. This is going to change the way people develop going forward. Typically, we don't typically run multiple VMs on a laptop as a dev machine, but with containers, now we have that luxury of running different VMs or different containers on the laptop as part of the development process. And you can run only one virtual machine using one VMX and VMDK files, whereas you can start many containers from a single Docker image. So there's typically a one-to-one correspondence between the physical files and the VM, whereas in case of a Docker, you can use the same image and start a new container. Now let's look at the similarities between VM and a container. Processes in one VM obviously cannot be seen from another VM. Similarly, same concept applies in containers as well. Processes running in one container cannot be seen from other containers. So there's an isolation between containers in that sense. And each VM has its own root file system. Of course, it even has its own operating system. But whereas in case of a Docker, each container gets its own file system. Like we talked before, it manages it very efficiently. It doesn't give you a new copy of file system. It gives you the read-only copy of the root file system. So whenever you make a change, it makes a copy separately. So it's called copy and write. So that way you see only your changes and the underlying root file system. And each VM has or can have its own virtual network adapter and the IP address and ports, etc. And same concept. Even in Docker, you can have a virtual network adapter, and you can assign it an IP, and you can open certain ports as you like. And VM is a running instance of physical files. Physical files are VMX and VMDK files in case of a VMware virtual machine. And similarly, Docker containers are running instance of Docker images. That's all, folks. Thank you for your time. Please do visit our blog, releaselogics.com/blog. Thank you.